computer.
I'm going to click my got it button, and now I've got it.
Welcome to FileMaker Talk. And we have a guest today, Court Bowman. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's great to be here. It's been a minute as we've talked.
Yes, it has. Cleveland Consulting. Where are you guys based?
Cleveland Consulting in Columbus, Ohio. It's the age-old joke.
Yeah.
People who have been in the FileMaker community for a long, long time will remember a great guy by the name of Grant Cleveland, who I took a job with, 28 years ago. He was a great guy, loved FileMaker, and an amazing salesman and customer relationship guy, but wanted to do other things. And when I came to work for him, I fell in love with FileMaker and didn't want to do other things. The company from him, I don't know, 27 years ago at this point, something like that.
Yeah.
He had a good reputation, and I am not egomaniacal, and so Cleveland Consulting was just fine with me. And so everyone, my standard joke when I'm talking to customers is sometimes customers in Cleveland expect me to be able to get there quickly, and customers in Columbus ask me how the drive down was. But apart from that, it hasn't affected us too much.
I'm trying to remember my Ohio geography. They're pretty much on opposite sides of the state, aren't they?
Columbus is in the middle. Cleveland's on the north edge. So.
Okay, got it. Maybe I'm thinking about some other state that has two cities right on the borders of the other states.
Well, Ohio does, but the other one's Cincinnati. So
there you go. That's
there's
totally
the 3C highway. You know, there's that 3C highway: Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati.
Got it.
Yeah.
Kind of like the
Pacific North. Yeah, as a Pacific Northwest guy, you would not be familiar with the Midwest.
I've
in the middle.
I actually I've been in all 50 states, so I've traveled around the U.S. a lot.
Nice.
But in the Northwest, I grew up in California and then lived in Portland, so we had the I-5 corridor, right? It goes from Mexico to Canada. Been a lot of time on that.
We have twice done what used to be called the West Coast Tour, speaking tour. There were user groups.
Yes.
We came through once, start in Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, I think LA, San Diego,
Yeah, as many as will take you, right? Usually you get to do it the Wedge, back when the Wedge was the headquarters. That was always great. And then FM Disc in LA. Yeah. And then it was an Orange County group.
Yeah.
I loved
and then you could
those
bounce
tours.
out to Texas if you wanted to and do next week or something like that.
I did the Texas tour. They had 3 cities, I think, at one point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It was good one for those of us that make products.
Then COVID, and now it's Zoom.
And now everything is by Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah. And so meetups can be anywhere in the world. You can sell stuff that way. Definitely a lot of people are doing it. So catch me up on the last, say, 4 or 5 years of what your company's been doing. And then we'll launch into what our main topic is, which is ccPivot. You've got a new version. I'm excited.
We do. Thank you. So we have, as I think everybody in the FileMaker community has benefited from FileMaker making more and more things possible. We've leaned hard into, and have for a number of years, that JavaScript code can live right in FileMaker, and so now really anything can happen. We're doing a lot with external integrations. We are probably still, so we do some web application development, but we are still probably 75% FileMaker custom work, 20% web custom work, and 10% products. And we have just in the last year really started changing that focus to, we would love to be 50% FileMaker custom work, 40% products, 10% custom web work. The custom web work is just a convoluted world that changes quickly, and you're competing with people that charge $7 an hour overseas, and it's hard to make that differentiation. So
yeah, for sure. But there are some FileMaker people who do that. I think Mindfire is one of them. I think
Mindfire Solutions. I think Excelsis has a pretty big. I think they even have a WordPress component to their company, which does, I think, great stuff for them, which is an interesting little world. Yeah. So we have always been, and I think we'll continue to always be, a smallish company, 5 to 7 employees. And, as most of us are, between 1 and 20 contractors working at any point in time, depending on what the slate looks like and who I can lay my hands on. And we've always liked it that way. We don't do more custom projects a year than I can know the people and understand the project. And so
I like that. Right. So there's sort of like rungs of size that make sense. And that 5 to 7 is a really good one, because you don't have to have like an HR director. You can have, you can have a small staff, like a salesperson who wears a couple of hats, maybe sales and marketing, and contract some of that stuff out. And then your developers can be managed by one project manager.
Right.
And so there's kind of a good perfect size. If you get beyond that, you kind of have to have, I don't know, 20, and then there's like another spot at 50.
Yeah.
And who knows
Yeah, I'm
what
still
beyond
the
that.
size where every person's payroll matters. I was talking to somebody at DevCon a long time ago, and this is one of the things I've always liked about the FileMaker community. We've all had ebb and flows in our careers, and I was having a tough year one year, and I was talking to somebody. I was like, I don't make payroll for myself every month. And he was saying, yeah, it's interesting when your company gets to the size where you skipping payroll doesn't help anymore. And I thought that was an interesting way to put it. Fortunately, we've been blessed and we're lucky and things are going well now. But it is interesting when you cross some of those thresholds, because when you're starting a company, sometimes you hire those first employees and you think, well, if I got to skip my payroll this time, at least everybody else can get paid.
Yeah.
And then those days sometimes are behind you. If you get to 20 people, one guy skipping his payroll, unless you're, I don't know, modern American CEO and pay yourself 20 times what everybody else makes. But
yeah. Let's not even talk about that stuff. But I mean, yeah, there's certainly big companies for sure do that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So that's where we are. We're shifting into products. We've released 2 products this year. We're hoping to release 3 next year. So we've started to do some vertical stuff, and some of that stuff has been pretty good for us and pretty interesting. It's nice to find partners that believe in an industry. We've always said to release a good product, you have to have 3 things: somebody with the technical expertise to build the right product, somebody with the industrial expertise to know what the right product looks like, and then somebody with a voice in that community that can speak to those people and has some cachet already. And for most industries, we only bring one of those. We have the technical expertise to build the right product, but if we've got a good partner we're looking at for next year to maybe build something for the barbecue catering industry. Which is interesting, because most catering industries, you can start the food and finish the food the same day. But that is not true for, say, brisket, which is a 4-day process for people who do it, or for pastrami, who, might be a 7-day process. And
wow. Yeah.
So if you need to know how much pastrami need on Saturday, yeah. And we met them actually through ccPivot. They wanted something to schedule out products days and days in advance. They wanted to be able to look and see, what do I need to start today? Because if I start chicken today, I finish it today. But if I start pastrami today, I finish it next week on today.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the 2 products you released just this year, what were they?
So we've released, so they were new versions of products we had in the past. We wanted to renovate everything for 19. We could accomplish a lot of things, make it faster, get better integration, things like that. And so that's ccPivot that we're talking about today. And then we had a product that's done well for us over the year called CC Nonprofit, because as discussed, we are the least clever people in the world. And so all our products start with CC for the Cleveland Consulting. Can't think of 2 other letters. And, so that's where we've landed. But good. Yeah, branding, right?
Well, there is that, and also like the CC, like a carbon copy.
Yeah, the creative. We're hoping to poach a little Creative Commons,
Creative Commons, Creative Cloud
familiarity. Yeah, so there's a lot of CCs out there.
There's nothing wrong.
So the other one is for nonprofits. As most firms, right? We try to stay involved in our communities. We try and do a lot of work that is not just profitable and enjoyable, but good at some level. And so we get asked periodically by great organizations that are doing great things to solve problems that are $20,000 problems, but they have a $20 budget.
Right.
And that's the nature of nonprofits. And so a number of years ago, we built a product, CC Nonprofit, that we just released version 4. I guess when this sends, this will be a formal announcement. We soft launched it last week. It's on the website, but we haven't started marketing. That is a complete revamp of that, using a much more modern, we're leaning on Google's material design standards for the interface and things like that, and much faster, and does some better external integrations. And we took some features out that it didn't need and added some features in that it did need. So that's another product we're selling, trying for a low cost of entry. And we actually, in that case, we do have a web version, so people wouldn't necessarily need to buy FileMaker for the predominant use of it for some smaller nonprofits.
So not WebDirect then, but some other web technology?
No, we're bundling the FileMaker license with it, so they can use WebDirect, but they're going to use our license. So.
Got it. Oh, okay. Vertical license thing. So ccPivot, let's kind of get into that. This is something I totally loved when it first came out. Giving you the ability to do a pivot table, which is one of the weird things FileMaker cannot do, and a spreadsheet can, where you can shift horizontal to vertical, right? I think people kind of know what that is. And it's super important for certain types of reports.
Right.
When you need raw columns to be rows and vice versa.
Right. And so this actually came out of a conversation. So John Sindlar, good friend of both of ours and great guy in the community. We had a conversation a long time ago when John and I worked together that there are a number of products that could be built, and identifying them is a matter of finding those things that FileMaker probably should do in a perfect world, but doesn't do natively. And so the first product we built together was once upon a time CC Calendar, and is now seed code and rules the world and dominates the entire industry. And it's probably the best known product. And John has taken that and done amazing things with it. That was born out of the idea that just a way to display your existing data better in this view that didn't already exist is a great way to identify a needed product in the industry. And I mean, a little casual story, John will laugh if he listens to this podcast, but I remember the first time we went to sell that product, we took it on a CD to DevCon. And this was early days of DevCon, obviously, since we brought CDs. And we thought, wouldn't it be awesome? We used to spend a long time ago, maybe 10 grand to take a few of us to DevCon. That's what it would cost to go to DevCon.
Yep.
And we thought, well, if we sell this product for $100 at DevCon and we sold 100 of them, we could go to DevCon for free. So we burned 100 CDs in a wild fit of optimism. And way back then, nobody was really selling products. It was a bunch of custom software developers standing behind tables talking to each other and vying for the 4 customers that weren't already using FileMaker that showed up. Weird gathering get-together / sales conference. And lo and behold, we sold 100 of them in the first day and a half, and we were in a hotel room burning CDs at night, and we just had a great time, and it was a real revelation for us. And so,
that's so funny. I have a similar story. Like way back in the day, I wrote a program for when I used to work for Oregon Catholic Press called LitPlan. It was a church music planning program. And I loaded up all of the thousands of songs that were published by the company. Went to a conference with a CD and sold 100 copies at the conference.
That's
so
funny.
Like totally a parallel story. And it sold for $100.
That's awesome. Yeah. We had a great conference that year. We went to Morton's, at the end of the conference, splurged. It was the, early days fancy, I don't know. It was a good time. So born out of that conversation, later on, John had moved on. He'd done amazing things with seed code and seed code calendar and all that stuff. And we had a similar insight that a pivot table is just a way to look at your existing data. All we want to do is take the data that customers already have in it. And FileMaker does a lot of things really well. It summarizes and it aggregates data in list views really well, as you mentioned. Sub-summary reports are incredibly easy to build. There's summary fields. There's a lot of great things you can do. But it doesn't do a couple things well / at all. And we were in our 100th time of building, choosing to decide, am I going to build 20 relationships because they would never have more than 20 columns of data, or 20 fields to summarize that data, and trying to get data to interact where we can summarize it at the intersection of 2 different records. So if you have widgets that you're selling and you want to see how many widgets did I sell per state, you could obviously do that in FileMaker. That's a good sub-summary report. But if you want to see widgets sold by person, by state, by date in a pivot table, that's just incredibly hard to build in FileMaker. And there's some great articles out there about how to do that. And most of them involve build a bunch of relationships or build a bunch of fields.
Right. Or maybe a really intense script with a bunch of queries. And then display data like with button bars. Like a button bar with a bunch of globals or JSON or something.
But then you got to pre-decide how many buttons go in the button bar. So this is the great thing with a calendar is every week for never say always, but every week for everybody, I think using FileMaker has 7 days in their week. So you really only need 7 things out to left or right if you're showing a week view. If you're showing a month view, you only need 7, and then you got to decide how many weeks can be in a month.
Right.
Spoiler, not 4.
Like calendar views can either have 4 or 5 or 6, right?
Right, exactly. Because if it's the 1st to the 31st, and the 1st is on a Sunday, as now I'll enrage half your audience, as the week ends on a Sunday for all normal people and starts on a Monday.
The only time you ever have 4 is in a perfect storm February.
Right, exactly.
Anyway,
okay. So this is a way just to display customers' existing data in a FileMaker database where you can do all the FileMaker stuff you want to it, and you can integrate it. And one of the things that we did was we kept it as a separate file. So we could obviously make this an add-on and you could drag it into your file. But the nice thing is in asking people to reproduce their relationship graph in the reporting sense, it lets them just graph on that data. So you can pull tables from various files. You don't have to have all your data in one file.
Yep.
You don't have to have all your data in one table as you would with a summary report. You can aggregate data at the intersection of data wherever it lives in your system. So
I remember when I first got it and implemented it, that I really loved that it was a separate file.
Yeah.
Because there was so much other stuff that you would need to copy in. It just seemed like too much to sort of copy in.
Yeah.
Some of the programs I've written, right? FM search results, FM log, recent records, those ones are copied in because they're really small. Like FM log, all of the development was to see how small we could make it. And Pivot is a ton more code than that.
Yeah. There's a lot of JavaScript code in this, and it's all right there. I mean, obviously the way FileMaker deploys JavaScript code. Now, I will say in ccPivot, it's minified, so you're not going to be able to look at it and learn much from it, but it's all sits right there in the file, and the file itself is pretty small. We can take a look at it on screen together. If you want.
We can do that. So obviously the audio podcasts, we won't get to see, but I definitely want to see it. And then I want to talk about, like you said, you updated things for 19. So I want to know about like what new things that have come along in FileMaker 1819, which have been some significant things, really helped propel the speed and the simplicity of what you can do. Yeah, show me the thing.
Sure. Okay, so let me
let's talk through what's different.
Share this desktop with you.
Oh yeah, look at that. Really, you've totally changed the UI too. Very modern.
Yeah. So we've leaned into the material design for this as well. So this is one of those things that we were talking about. ccPivot could theoretically be an add-on, right? Because it does pretty much live in one layout. So for those people that are listening and not going to be able to look at it, ccPivot is pretty straightforward. There's a settings, and in the settings, you can leverage all your existing tables that you've added to the file. In this case, we ship it with some sample data. You can build some custom lists. You can build some custom CSS now, which is exposed, so you can have it look any way you want to. And then we even expose the separators in case your data happens to have what we consider as a logical separator between data for SQL queries to display. You know, if a pipe asterisk pipe asterisk pipe happens to exist in your data, you can swap that separator out.
So I'm going to ask you some questions about it. So first of all, the page we're looking at here has, rather than having, like, I think about data you have in dates, right? You have a table that has a sale data that has a record that says on such and such date to such and such customer, this product sold for such and such amount. And so that's completely like a vertical list. But what we're looking at here is dates in rows, January, February, March, April, for a specific year. And then the rep in columns across. Is this all data in a web viewer? What are we looking at?
So this is a web viewer, exactly. So if I go to list view, go to layout view, go to layout view, you can see this is just a web data viewer. And so what we're doing is we're saying, you know, your standard go get stuff. And then we just have a URL here that is URL encoded, this get file name and the CSS. So we have the HTML and the CSS and it exists in the current file name. So you can rename it, and it's just all being done right here. So quick browse layout. One of the things that we've really been able to do is expose more of this to the customers. So here under settings, if you look, if I click on sample company, for example, now sample company, we have name, state, really long field name to see what happens, test really long field name to see what happens too. And then we can put custom labels in here. We can choose to display it or not. And when we first did this, this was a lot slower, but FileMaker has just really sped up their environment. So now this is the place where we're getting all that data. So here's our companies and here's our invoices, and you could custom label this stuff across your whole system. One of the feedbacks we got from our customers was, well, I'd like to show it to people, but I can't show them the field names because I have GZ underscore ID underscore, you know, and so all that stuff.
The feel of this is super similar to using the add-on function in FileMaker. You add it in, the data is shown in a web viewer that uses JavaScript. There's some guts behind the scenes you don't have to worry about. There's some black box level of it. And then there's the cool settings configuration where you can just simply go in. Just as exactly the same as, you know, going into like the calendar, the simplified calendar or the charting system that ships with, I think starting in 19.
And so that FileMaker charting thing is a good analogy because we actually thought when that first came out, that was going to, compete with us, but it doesn't actually have a pivot table. I would like to think it's because pivot tables are so hard, only the best of us can build those tools. But
so I have to say, I'm really kind of wondering what's going to happen with Clara Studio, because that world, pivot tables might be much more possible. It's not there yet, but there's some other views in Clara Studio that can kind of do some of this.
Right. And if they do, that's great. I'm sure John has thought to himself, if Claris builds a great calendar in, that's fine. I've got other things to do.
Yeah.
But what Claris hasn't done well is the scrolling left to right. So,
I'm watching
you can see
do
I've got
that.
Infinite. I don't have to decide how many columns I need in advance. If I add another product, if I'm not just selling doodads, and what am I selling? Doodads and tiddlywinks and trinkets and widgets in my sample data. That data just shows up. I don't have to pre-plan for how many products do I have? How many salespeople would I have? I'm totaling them by sales, and I'm getting in this the total by sales and quantity.
Yeah.
So I can get my volumes. But if I come over here to edit the report, we're now looking at under the hood of this report. You can see I've got my column slicers and I've got my row slicers. So I'm totaling it by product name and by individual salesperson and by sales date.
Yeah.
Then my data is the total sale, and I'm just counting the ID, because ID will always have a value. And then I'm showing, 2 years worth of data, 2011 and 2020, or 2011, just 2011 data for this sample data. And where it's not a special order or whatever,
Got it. And so as I'm looking at this, I'm visualizing how many pages this report would be if it was in the vertical, like a, non-pivoted. It would be
some sub summary report.
It would be a sub summary, right? Because you've got 3 levels, and it probably would be 20 pages to show exactly what you're showing. It would be much less visual and much less readable.
And then there's one thing we were able to do with this that's really interesting that FileMaker really can't do. And this was one of our real insights, is that, so there's 2 things that we've added in this version. Well, one that we added in the previous version and one that we added in this version that I really want to show. And one is showing missing data. So if, for example, March has no data in a sub summary report, March just wouldn't show up.
Yep.
But because I think this one, so if we were to show December for Rob, let's say we were going to show Rob's sales for December. Let's say we were just going to show, or that's Bob, I guess. If we were just going to show Bob's sales, we would have no column for July, August, October, and December.
Exactly.
And if you're a sales manager looking at the 0 months are the months you want to highlight, not the months you want not to show up in a column.
Right.
Because you want to know, why did Bob sell nothing for 4 months of this year? And so when we have a pivot table like this, when we're gathering the data through SQL queries and showing the intersection, whether there's data or not, reporting on missing data becomes trivial. And that's a really important thing for a lot of businesses to see when is my data not low, but actually gone. And so that's one really important thing. Yeah. Now, one thing we added in this version that you may have caught, and anybody who gets to look at this video may have noticed, you notice here under date, I have months. But over here on the edit, if you're noticing as I scroll through, this is just a date field. So this is just a date field. That's not a month of date field. The reason that works is because we're sorting this list by a custom value list called month names. And I'm also requiring custom grouping by month and month name. So knowing that it's a date field, we can say, well, just give me the month out of that. So if I reported that across 2 years or 3 years, so if I were to clear out this year,
that was my next question. Oh, I see. So the filter says, show me 1 year, show me 5 years,
show me 1 year. So what I can do is I can take this same field, sale date, date sorted custom.
Yeah.
No, the standard rule is never demo software live. So let's see how badly I'm violating my own rule. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to sort this by custom. Well, actually, I don't have to sort it by custom because year is a number.
Yeah, this is the part where it's going to be lost in audio format, I think. So
right. So what I'm doing is I'm saying what I really want is just custom grouping by year. Because it's a date field, I just want to group it by year. And all I had to do to group date by year is the people listening would understand. Normally what I would have to do is I would have to go in and make a date underscore year field to get the year out of the date.
You'd have to make a calculation function.
Yeah. Right. I don't need a calculation. And then I'm adding data to my schema for reporting, which is just an awful thing to do. If you don't
totally agree. I totally agree.
So now I've just said, well, for this date field, just show me the year data. And I'm going to close that, and I'm going to close this, and I'm going to hit my refresh button. And if I don't hate myself, then we'll now get, and I don't hate myself, that's good. So now I get 2008, January through December, 2009, January through December, 2010, January through December,
I
11,
see that.
12.
Yeah, so to describe it to the audio people, basically each of these is a block of rows. So you get 12 rows, 1 row per year. So you're kind of getting vertical and horizontal data.
Right.
This is, I think, straight up impossible to do any other way I could think of. It'd be enormously complex anyway.
Right. And what's great about this, in just to toot my own horn a little bit, is that now, well, this has been both a blessing and a curse to those of us in the development world.
To toot your own horn because you wrote every bit of this code, you mean?
No, I did not. I have a great team working for me, but once upon a time, if a customer wanted to say, oh, but now I want that report categorized by year. Oh, and that's interesting. But what if we grouped it by day of week? What if I grouped those sales data by zip code? What if I wanted to know zip code by year? What if I wanted to know state by year, product by zip code? And these are the questions that people who are really trying to pull their data apart should be able to ask.
Yeah, and those would be
FileMaker leaned hard into integration with some business intelligence tools for a hot second, and then leaned back out shortly thereafter. But those questions, developers love answering those questions, but it takes time, and it takes developer time to make that change to that custom report. And sub-summary, like you said, you could theoretically do this in a sub-summary, but you can't see the intersection of doodads sold by Jane in 2008 in March very easily by just intersecting a row and a column. You'd have to scroll all the way down to where that was sub-summarized and sub-summarized and sub-summarized.
And then another thing that I'm noticing about this is hosted.
Yeah, so this is on a server. We've got this on our dev server.
And that refresh button that you clicked, I was watching. That took way less than 1 second. It took approximately 364 milliseconds, give or take. I'm making that up. That was insanely fast.
And so I just went to the backend table, and that's on 10,000 records. So not a ton, but not none.
Yeah.
So that's faster. So we do the select, we do the filter before we do the aggregation. Of course. So even if you have a database with 1 million records, and we have customers with databases with well over 1 million records. But if you select on a reasonable set of data, that report is still just very fast. So that was less than a second on 10,000 records on a server sitting in my home office in the basement on Wi-Fi. Obviously, better internet is better, So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so it's not WAN hosted, but local.
Right. Okay. Well, no, this data center, this CCI-dev server is, it's a DigitalOcean server.
Oh, okay. Got it. So it's not, it's WAN. This is WAN, not LAN.
Yeah.
Okay. Damn, I'm impressed. So the podcast is not so much about the pricing and stuff like that, but just kind of to talk about new products. But of course, I have to ask how much it costs.
Right. So we've gone to the model that a lot of people have gone to. We've had more and more customers wanting to budget this way. We're back and forth on this. We have gone to a subscription model for this, and it gets cheaper the more seats you buy. So at a minimum, it's $29 per user per month, and just scales from there. If you go to our website and buy it, you get it for free for 10 days, and then it will start pestering you to pay us. So you get started pretty quickly. Dive in, $29 a user a month. And for us, that user is a user needing to generate reports, not necessarily see reports, because what a clever person will notice, and this is completely unlocked when you get it. So this report that you're looking at is just a container in a web viewer this data, that results could be added to any other file in your system. So you'll need to run the refresh. You need a license to click the refresh button. But if you just need someone to see reports, we have had people wanting to save money to take the time to generate reports on a report generation team and then share them with their entire organization. All you got to do is get that HTML out to them, because as long as you don't have to click refresh, you're not calling the tool.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've got like a client with 20 seats of FileMaker. One person needs to do the reporting. They buy that one license for $29 per user per month, and then they can build the reports to hard content and deliver them to everybody else. That's your model. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so as long as you're not clicking that refresh button, we're not going to check to see if you're a new user. If you're just looking at existing data, you're just off to the races.
Because I'm a nerd, tell me about some of the guts. Let's maybe stop screen sharing. We can see each other again.
Okay.
So I know that there was SQL in the very first version, tons of execute SQL commands, right?
Right. So that's how we get the data. That's half of the secret sauce in this, is that we use SQL to get all the data, which means that we don't technically need your tables in our file. That is actually a simplification we could do. We could go get the data from your file. We could actually go get the tables from your file. So we could just show you all the tables in your file. And if instead of in the settings, us asking you for the tables you want to report on, we just ask you for the file, we could presume that you wanted to report on all the tables in your file.
Oh, but otherwise,
I think an overhead nightmare to go get that data. And we like a lean reporting interface in the tool.
So as I remember it, you actually just had table occurrences, right? So I put your file as part of my solution. I had table occurrences for the data that I want to summarize on.
Right.
And so the data is not living there. Your file's just, but that way you can query it. It can query it as though it's in the file.
As though it's in the file, right? So it acts local, but integrates with the simplicity of remote.
Which means it could also summarize data that's stored in Claris Studio with Claris Pro, where the data is in the cloud.
Exactly. Or if you have a multi-file solution, imagine how hard it would be to report on data across, if let's say you have a larger company that has 4 different departments using FileMaker, and you wanted to report on the aggregation of all that data, say employee time for a project that touched 4 different departments. That's actually relatively trivial with this. You have to add those files as external data sources to our solution.
Right.
But I have at DevCon, when we first released this, violating all laws of public speaking and demonstration, integrated this live on the stage at DevCon with a data set and started reporting on it. I've done it enough, obviously, where I can do it in about 5 minutes, but even narrating, I can do it in 10 or 15.
I love that. I did a presentation last week, and during the middle of the presentation, FileMaker exhibited a bug that I've never seen before. Like I dragged something onto a layout, and there was an invisible dialog box somewhere. I couldn't click. I couldn't hit escape. It was just gone. So it was like a live demo. I'm like, okay, well, law of demo. Something goes wrong. Yeah. The trick is how fast you can recover. So half of the secret sauce is the SQL functions. What's the other half?
So the other half is, once we get that data, we have to build a pretty good. So one of the things is this that you're looking at on screen when we show you the report. I swirl my mouse as if you're still seeing my screen, but you aren't, and nobody is at this point. But that is just an HTML table. So you can actually select all. You can go in that, copy that web viewer's contents, and paste it into Excel. And you just get a table. Anything that understands HTML tables will translate that just fine. And so we had quite a bit of JavaScript work to translate the JSON array that we build. And so we're leaning hard on FileMaker's much better JSON now.
Yeah.
To really organize that data in a way that we could write some standard libraries that would take a FileMaker driven JSON array of data and build an HTML table out of it. That is actually a little under the hood JavaScript library that we could use any place else that we wanted to. I don't know where else one would use a JSON array needs to be turned into an HTML table. Now that we have ccPivot, that's kind of the best version of it.
It totally makes sense. So are you also using JavaScript to do a lot of the calculations and summaries, which is vastly faster than the FileMaker functions?
We are. So we're not using any FileMaker functions. That's why we can do some things that aren't FileMaker-y that you would have to do in a calculation field that you could. So FileMaker's aggregate functions are excellent. And you can do a lot of things, but they're not all available in the subsummary reporting. They're not exposed to the reporting tool. They're exposed to the calculation engine. And so we can do things like standard deviation or averages in a report engine.
Okay. I got to ask you.
Yeah.
I love interrupting because
no, that's fine.
I'm just a jerk. So FileMaker has a average function, which they call average, but it's a mean. It is not a median. And even though I'm not a statistician, I know that they're extremely different.
They are very different. Yes.
Do you have both?
We do. We do.
Sweet.
We have. Oh no, we don't. We actually, when we rebuilt it, I think we lost. So we've just got average, which is mean, not median. But now that you've said that, I'm going to have to add median back in.
Well,
see,
I'm not even sure. I mean, I know it's
4.2.
4.2. So I'm trying to think of when I really see it used. I listen to a lot of nerdy science podcasts, and I'm trying to remember even the statistical difference between them. I think the median like throws out the two ends or something.
Yeah,
And
so
gets
I
like
am
the
not.
other kind
It's
of an
been a
average.
long time since I was a math major in college. That was my major. Mine was my
Oh,
first major, but I switched from math to computer science because I wanted something that wasn't quite so nerdy.
wait. So,
Mission failed.
so I, who almost have a master's degree in music, know more about the difference between median and mean than you, a math major.
At this point, probably, yeah,
And
for
I'm
sure.
also sure that I'm totally wrong about my description. So hopefully
Yeah.
people will comment and set me right,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
don't have the energy to go to Wikipedia and research
Isn't
it.
that the great YouTube algorithm trigger, is to say something slightly wrong so everybody comments to drive the
Oh,
views
that's
up?
really funny. Yeah. And also to say, you won't believe what happens at 38 minutes.
Right. Yeah. No. Stay to the end to find out.
Right. That's really cool. I love the pricing model. I love the speed. I'm dying to play with it.
Yeah. So the speed is really that's really in rebuilding this, we really were able to get a lot of speed out of there. I, I've had developers, I've worked with developers, I've been a developer, and I've had developers working for me for a lot of my life. And we have all had something go catastrophically wrong where you had to start over. It doesn't happen much with FileMaker these days. You build on a server, servers are
Yep.
fast enough where you can do your work live. But I remember
Yep.
once upon a time, you used to build files locally, and every once in a while a file would crash and you'd lose some work.
Yep.
And that just doesn't happen to us much these days. And I always used to tell people, we're engineers, we're not artists. It will get better when you build it again.
Yeah, it's true.
With art, there's a unique insight. I'm not a good, but I am a musician, and I have played. My music is not better every time I play it. I have had good and bad days in playing music, and that's an art. You can have a great day and never get that good again. That's not true for us as engineers. It gets better every time you rebuild it. And so we've really benefited from that in this product. It has gotten better as we rebuilt it.
I'm going to differ with you on that. I think as a musician, you steadily get better over time.
You do steadily get better over time,
and
but you can have a great performance, and the next one won't just automatically be better.
But as an engineer, you can also have done something in the past that's better than the stuff you're doing now.
You can, but you won't lose that. You can always build. You can't always build music. And I'm thinking particularly of people that are visual artists, because you can have a great painting, and redoing that painting won't make it better.
This is true.
Now, as a performance artist, that has its own connotations, but as an art form based in performance, let me say it that way, you can continuously improve. And I'm sure if you look at visual artists, they improve over time.
So this is great. So as a nerd, I'm also thinking about this, right? I'm a composer of music. That's mainly what I do. I write classical music for choirs because that's a very, very profitable, lucrative. I mean, eventually I could make hundreds of dollars in a year. Yeah. But it's just what I love to do. It's just fun. And that is very, very much like coding. You can write something good, and if you try to rewrite it or edit it, it's going to make it worse. But you steadily get better, and each thing you do builds on all the things, all the mistakes you've made and learned from. And so you can steadily get better at it in the exact same way that you can as a database programmer.
Yeah, and that's interesting. This is way afield, but I love these kind of conversations that you and I have had in the past, even. There are definitely things that will not be improved through iterative refinement on the product, and things that definitely will. I think software is one of those. So there's a lot of books out on software development, but I've heard it said that software design is entropy reducing, and software support is entropy increasing, regardless of your level of diligence. And I think that's true. So we rewrote ccPivot for version 4, but from version 2 to 3 was an improvement. And it got better, but it also got bigger. And it's really hard to carefully and diligently remove all the things you no longer need. And anybody who's built FileMaker systems, anybody who's built software systems knows the woes of legacy code, and great standards can help you reduce that. But I'm not sure that that's ever going to be the case. And so software development is both one of those things that is improved by refinement and harmed by refinement. I've had friends who are composers, none of them as talented as you, I'm sure. They're barely making tens of dollars at this point. But I would assume from my conversations that composing on a piece is always an improving process.
I don't know. I think there's a phrase that I really love called "kill your children." You have to sort of, and when you're doing something that you really, really love, you're building a
That should
database,
not be your pull quote
it
for
should
this
not be a
podcast.
pull quote for this. But I mean, basically it's the things that you care about really deeply that you have to be able to give up if they prove to be a bad idea. When I compose music, I kind of I have a big sketch and I kind of build up a bunch of stuff out and then I focus on a bunch of details in certain sections. And then as I do it, I determine parts of it that I don't need and I delete. The hardest part is to determine what doesn't work, delete a whole entire section, and then rewrite it. And you totally have to do that as a database developer.
Yeah, you do.
You do. You build something and you go, oh, the data model in my head was wrong. I have to completely redo it, export data, blah, blah, blah. And good developers can do that without emotion from practice.
Yeah.
I think
that's one of the things that we get as we've done this longer. You and I have both been developing databases for a long time. As we've talked before, I develop less than I used to. I'm not writing code every day, but I try and build one system a year just so I stay relevant to my employees and my customers. And as I go to share, insights with people, they're not insights from, Fortran and Pascal, but a reasonably modern development environment. And it's interesting because you get to the point, I think, where you find a joy in rebuilding. Like, I enjoy starting over. It's a lot of fun to take this thing that I built over years and build. And I think, it would be better if I did this. And at this point, I'm going to start file new. I'm just going to go file new, blank, and try and minimize my copy paste. Maybe I'll bring some tables over because that table is fine. But let's just start from scratch and see what we get. I think that's a lot of fun.
It really is. I got to do that on a pretty significant project recently, and where I had complete control of what it was going to be. And it was so much fun. I still do a lot of coding, maybe not every day, but certainly every week. On large projects, medium projects, small projects, but mainly I teach. And so I continue coding because I want to stay current on things. Because I don't, like you said, I don't want to teach what the best practices were 15 years ago. That makes no sense. You got
Well, and that's one of the things that great education is so hard to find, because as consultants, we're teachers. One of the things that I've found, and this is one of the reasons I appreciate people like you out there doing good education, is because usually our customers need to be educated to hire us well. I've often thought there would be a role for somebody to only help customers hire FileMaker developers. It would be weird because then you'd be a bit like the godfather of FileMaker deciding who works and who doesn't. But it is interesting because it's very hard for a customer who's, particularly for small to medium businesses, who's probably never bought custom software before, doesn't understand FileMaker, doesn't know what normal form and database design is, or what material design is, or MVC from MVVM or things like that. To say, well, this person that's sitting in front of me, can they build my software well? Like, that's an incredibly hard decision to make. I don't know. I deeply hope that my customers aren't buying from me, and we do well, just because I'm outgoing and reasonably well spoken and can BS with the best of them, and I have a good patter. But I hope that they call the other customers that I've given them as references, that the sample databases that we show them, the sample specifications that we show them, and the work that we've done in the past lend some form of confidence. But I have this sneaking suspicion that they're just hoping against hope that this guy is not going to gouge us and ruin everything and walk away with my money, throwing a match over his shoulder, cackling like the Joker. Because I don't know how you evaluate that without a skill set that's too hard to get as a purchasing agent, as a customer, as a CEO, as a president, as a department head.
That is deeply philosophical, and one of the reasons why we should talk more often than we do. Yeah, I totally get that. Right. So like, there's the charisma that a sales rep should have. And then I think the reason I was good at selling things is because of my enthusiasm. I'm so excited. And I think I also really understood when a customer tells me what the problems are, like, here's my customer, here's what I do. These are the data sets that I have. These are the spreadsheets I'm currently using. These are the users who are doing that. These are the reports we need. As they're explaining it to me, ever since the beginning of my development, data models and relationships and fields and tables appeared in my head.
Right.
And so at the end of the meeting, I had a complete wireframe plan of how things would come together, what was an attribute and what was a table.
Yeah.
Um,
What's a record? What's
yeah,
a field? What's a
exactly,
table?
exactly.
What
And then
can just stay as a value list in FileMaker terms?
totally. Where was the one to many? Where was the many to many? Where was the one to one? All that stuff like that. Which ones needed to be in third normal form versus Boyce Codd normal form?
Right.
You don't even know what that is, do you?
No, I do. Unfortunately, I have read Database Design for Mere
Oh,
Mortals.
nice.
Yeah.
Boyce Codd. Never ever think about that one anymore.
Well, and that's one of the things that I think helps us as consultants, developers, people that go meet with business owners who understand their business and know their data, but don't really understand it. So we had a customer that did home service calls. They were service industry for mostly residential, but some commercial.
mhm.
And they had people who had addresses, as every customer database ever does. But one of the interesting things is what mattered was an attribute of the home. So what we did for people's to addresses was a many to many, because they cared less. They cared that you lived there, but they really wanted to know who all had ever lived there. Because if they had a customer in the past who had that address, they wanted to know that that customer had then moved, because then they could go find that customer and say, hey, you were happy with us last year, and I see that you've moved. That became a good sales opportunity for them. And so just knowing that person to address should be a many to many, customers to address, because they also wanted to know who else had lived there, was an important insight for them. And usually you'd never keep an address as a many to many. That's a one to many every day of the week.
You're totally right. I had another customer with a similar situation. It was a roofing contractor. So they wanted to know.
Ours was asphalt. Ours was driveways.
Right.
It's basically the same industry. One's just higher up in the air.
Yeah. So you have two customers, the house and the person.
Exactly.
Yeah. So like if, a new person buys the house, you want to be able to say, hey, I put this roof on your house and it has a 20-year warranty and I did it 18 years ago. You should think about, or whatever.
Well, and what was great is somebody would call and say, hey, we need to get our driveway resealed and we're at 123 my way. And they would say, oh, that's great. We were out there for the people who owned the home before. It's nice to meet you. We did that work. We'd be glad to come out and give you a deal on it, because we know that the underlayment and the foundation is all great. And so we'll do it as a reseal, not as a first seal.
Yep. Yeah.
And then people are like, oh, you know about me. You care about me. You're real people.
That sort of data model. Yeah. That's the key stuff. And by the way, that's really hard to teach in a class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Only,
Matt, if only there was somebody out there providing great FileMaker education for the industry. Do you know anybody like that?
There's this one guy, and that's one part he struggles with, but like it's basically teaching anything that for whatever reason came easily to you. Is kind of maybe more difficult to teach. I don't know.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things. Teaching knowledge is easy, relatively. Teaching wisdom is hard. And that's more a wisdom than a knowledge. That's knowing when to say when.
It's funny is
terrible drug program slogan, ask you to make your worst decision, your hardest decision when you're least competent. But nevertheless, knowing when is much harder than knowing what.
Yeah. I actually focus not on knowledge or wisdom, but on skill.
Well, there you go. So a follow-up question, what is the difference between knowledge, wisdom, and skill?
So, I think skill has more to do with wisdom. So knowledge is basically knowing that a function exists in FileMaker that can do a thing. It's knowing something like that. Skill is being able to do it quickly and effectively and correctly.
Okay. Yeah.
And wisdom is knowing when you have to do it correctly.
Right.
And so it really there's sort of a triangle, I think, between those things.
Yeah, that's interesting. That would be an interesting. That would be an interesting other podcast to get 2 or 3 people together and talk about that. You know, I can think of the medical industry, right? Knowledge is knowing that a mattress suture is a good way to close a wound. Wisdom is knowing which suture pattern to use in closing various wounds. But skill is just being able to do it. Like skill is having taken the time to practice on the orange, to practice on the artificial skin, to do it with your offhand if you're getting a cramp in your main hand, to do it with laparoscopic tools. And I wonder what the analogy for that is in FileMaker.
How do you know so much about this?
You know, we're all consultants for a living. We know a little bit about every industry in the world.
Yeah.
You know, we are the classic bard, right? Good at everything, great at nothing.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be an interesting intersection conversation, because I wonder what that looks like in FileMaker. We've all watched people develop and think, if you could just learn to do this better, you're making the right decisions, but you're going about them so unhelpfully methodically that it's, you know, I think, didn't DevCon have a speed contest one year?
Yeah. There was
like who could build a thing the fastest. I know Chris Kubica used to build like a CRM in 30 seconds. I forget what it was. Chris Kubica used to have this little like parlor trick / you know, great practice talent where he built a CRM from scratch, and I forget, faster than I can.
It's kind of funny. I kind of did that too. I don't think I've ever really tried to do that and timed it or anything like that. But when you do something a long time, you get really, really fast at the tool.
Right.
Yeah, there was a competition where they had a specific thing. There was a whole bunch of teams all doing it together, and you had to finish it first and have it work correctly. And then they had judges determine if it was actually solving the problem correctly. And like in different areas, you know what? When I was just at this conference in Sweden, I go to the European conferences now. There was a person who was in that group. They won, or they were participating in it at that DevCon. And it was so long ago, I had kind of forgotten. I don't know, 2008 or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Ages ago.
Yeah. And then there's another thing that I have done. It's not quite speed-based, but it's a game show. It's a FileMaker game show.
Oh,
where we pit,
interesting.
We do it in meetups, and we pit 2 topics, like A versus B. Like, should you use global fields or global variables? Should you use custom functions or use recursion and scripts? Should you use, you know, so I'm trying to think of some good examples of things. And then we have a champion argue each side. And then everyone who's in the group votes with a FileMaker database on each topic as it comes up. And then you can see which one actually won. It's really, really fun. That's one of the other really cool file new databases I've worked on.
That's
been
cool.
Fun.
Yeah.
Me and
those
Eric
are
Matthews
fun things to build. Yeah, those are fun things to build. Things that are purely for fun. A long time ago, back when custom functions first came out, what was that? FileMaker 7, I think, something like that. I remember building recursive custom functions and loving that. And I built a database, or a custom function I called Ilfe Akerme, which translated any text into Pig Latin. Just had a blast.
That's excellent. Yeah.
It's interesting. The rules for Pig Latin are are a little unintuitive to write into a FileMaker script. We don't think of
that makes sense, because then there's I remember the exceptions too, like words that started with a vowel or something like that.
Your viewers can leave that as an exercise. I'm sure it exists out in some database of custom functions somewhere, someplace.
So there's custom functions with recursion,
right?
And then there's regular and tail recursion,
right?
And then there's the while function, which does
while, which is new in 18.
Yeah, recently.
18 or
right around then. I don't think either one of them is the way to do recursion in FileMaker. I think because you can't test it, there's no kind of unit testing. There's no, but a script can do recursion.
Yeah.
And all three, a script is probably less fast than the other ones, but it's still pretty damn fast.
Right.
And you can test it. You can test it very, very carefully, line by line, variable by variable.
Yep. I think FileMaker's debugging testing environment is one of those things that is either excellent or awful, depending on, you know, because, for example, in that competition we were talking about earlier, a custom function. I haven't even done the testing to see if while is faster than a custom function recursion, but those are pretty quick. And I know they're fast. I know custom functions are faster than scripts. And so if in a competition of who can build the thing fastest and which is best, right? An evaluator could reasonably argue speed is important.
Mhm.
But if you're only building it for the competition and never have to support it, debugging never comes up. Being
Well,
able to debug perform script on server would be an amazing thing to do.
right.
But
Yeah, totally. And yeah, that has to be done by logging, right? There's really tricky
right,
things, and you could forget to have some, variable that needs to be done. I think a lot of developers focus on like the raw speed of something, and they're like, oh, when my test data of 100,000 records does this custom function with recursion, it takes 3.8 seconds, and the while function does it in 3.1, and the script does it in 15.9. And so, like, clearly the best way to do it is the custom function. But you know what? No one runs that function on 100,000 records. They run on 5,000. So now you're talking about milliseconds. And the most important thing is not this computer science, PhD, it's not academic.
Right.
It is how effectively can I write it? How effectively can I troubleshoot it? How can I adapt it from one solution to another? That to me, that's way more important.
Way more important. And I think this circles back to what we were talking about earlier. I think in our skill, wisdom, knowledge is knowing the different ways to perform recursion.
Mm-hmm.
While custom function scripts, even technically in JavaScript, you can
that would be by far the fastest way.
By far the fastest, but also easily the hardest to debug.
For sure. Yeah.
And so skill would be being able to do those well. Like, can you write a let statement without double clicking on let in the the calculation engine? Can you get the semicolons and the open and close parens and brackets right and from memory? And that would be skill.
Okay, so this is great. So yes and no.
Wisdom is knowing, well, yes, JavaScript is the fastest, the script is the slowest, but I've supported systems, not just deployed them, and I'll take the script over the JavaScript any day of the week or twice on Sunday, unless I'm doing something 50 times an hour on thousands of records.
Right. So first make it reliable, then make it fast is another mantra that I have. So I think it's kind of funny, like there's a skill of being able to write a let function from scratch or a JSON set element from scratch with all the correct punctuation and grammar. Right. I don't care about that.
Right.
Just copy and paste one that works.
Right.
There's no need to write it from scratch. There's no need to be able to do that correctly and remember everything. You just have to know what to fix and have a good standard of how what's on each line.
Right.
And copy and paste it.
And that's where, the truly wise or a skillful developer doesn't double click those complicated functions from the calculation column on the right. He uses his, quick key tool of choice. I use text expander, but whatever you like, I type FM let and I get my let function with the comment line and the stuff I want in it, because I don't want it all in one line. I want, multiple lines.
I write them from scratch using the dropdown, but then I just delete all the contents. And then I also use my data viewer to have all my common ones. So I keep like 40 or 50 things in there.
Yeah, I will admit I underused a data viewer for things like that.
It's like when I teach classes and I go to the calculation module, I just go straight to data viewer and use that for everything, because you can see the result, calculate right away.
Yeah.
And then you can also, when you write a function on data, you can flip record to record to record and see how it works. Even though it's teeny, looking at one, it's a much faster way to learn, iterate.
Yeah.
And then when you have it working, copy paste to wherever you're going to put it, which hopefully will not be a calculated field, but will be a set variable command, or maybe a button bar, which is my favorite thing, is a layout calculation widget.
Well, that's one of those things I'd love to. Maybe I should attend your class sometime, but I would love to have a good conversation / see somebody else's insight on. There are things that are very easy to do the FileMaker way that I often do, that my head of development, Ricky Pulaski, gives me a hard time for. So, for example, our standards would say no button should ever be a single step script, a one-step script. Like if you're clicking a button, it should run an actual script. Don't just pick a go to layout script step. Make a script for it, because if you ever have to change
You'll
it,
always regret it.
Yeah, you'll always regret it. But I will admit there are times where I'll just like, I just want to do a simple thing. And I've got a clear button next to a field and I just want to clear the field.
Yep.
And so I will do that sometimes. And there's a balance in our wisdom / experience to say, yeah, there's the best way to do it, but this is just faster.
No, I would actually go one step further. There are definitely times where having a button do a single thing without a script is the best practice. And I would fight on that one.
Yeah.
Because again, I was about to say time is money. But living in Greece, I met with someone recently who said, yeah, a lot of Americans think time is money, but time is not money. Time is more valuable than money. And and that's why they can have 3-hour, 4 or 5 hour dinners here. It's really interesting how hugely different perspective on things like that.
Time is money if money is the most important thing to you, but that's also sad. It's also sad if that's true.
Greeks don't talk about money. If they go to a dinner or something like that, it does not come up.
That's interesting.
They don't talk about their salaries. They don't talk about how much things cost. They don't talk about who's going to pay for dinner. It's just not done. And so you can focus on things that matter in life, which is beautiful.
Yeah, that is great.
And you think about that next time you have dinner with your friends, it almost always comes up as an American. These steaks are so great. They were on sale for only X dollars a pound or whatever. It just always comes up.
That is interesting. I'm going to have to pay attention to that. Now you've given me another little earwig that will haunt me for years to come. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, no big deal. This is an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
Come out with another new product so we can have another podcast interview.
All right. Well, we'll get together in another few months. We'll talk through what CC Nonprofit does and how we're making the world not just a richer place, but a better place.
Yeah, that would be sweet. And obviously that's a starting point. So you could kind of use a nonprofit.
So we do have it available unlocked. We do have it available online. If you never want to launch FileMaker in your life and you just want to get about the good work that you're doing, open a web browser and go to work. But you could get it and take it and go. That's one of the things we did change. Spoiler for the next podcast is we did finish everything. The first versions of CC Nonprofit we said everything was well begun. But,
yeah.
But now everything that's there is done. And we include a lot of things that are just modernized. Now you can send text messages, not just emails and things.
Nice.
Things like that from it. So that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So.
I have a million questions about that thing too. And QuickBooks integration, credit card charging, all that stuff. Questions. Anyway, for another podcast. Sir, thank you very much for your time today.
It has been a pleasure, Matt. I've enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for having us on.
Of course.